Hello, friends. Welcome to today's daily devotion. I'm Kerry Wood, pastor of the Golston Methodist Church, and we're looking this week at the 11th chapter of Romans, and today we're reading verses 1 through 10. Hear now these words from the Open English Bible translation. I ask then, has God rejected his people? Heaven forbid! For I myself am an Israelite, a descendant of Abraham of the tribe of Benjamin. God has not rejected his people whom he chose from the first. Have you forgotten the words of Scripture in the story of Elijah? How he appealed to God against Israel? Lord, they have killed your prophets, they have pulled down your altars, and I only am left. And now they are eager to take my life. But what was the divine response? I have kept for myself 7,000 who have never bowed the knee to Baal. And so, in our own time too, there is to be found a remnant of our nation selected by God in love. But if in love, then it is not as a result of obedience, otherwise love would cease to be love. What follows from this? Why, that Israel as a nation failed to secure what it was seeking, while those whom God selected did secure it. The rest grew callous. As the scripture says, God has given them a deadness of mind, eyes that are not to see and ears that are not to hear. And it is so to this very day. David, too, says, may their feasts prove a snare and a trap to them, a hindrance and a retribution. May their eyes be darkened so they cannot see, and do you always make their backs to bend? I'll be honest with you. This 11th chapter of Romans is probably the most difficult chapter in this letter for us as contemporary readers and hearers to comprehend, to be able to get our minds around, to be able to understand both what is Paul talking about, but what is the relevance of this to us today. And so as we go through this week, I hope to be able to at least get a sense of what is going on here and how we can best understand what its meaning and message is for us living in the 21st century. Well, Paul here, you got to remember, is in the middle of his extended lament over the fact that the people of Israel, by and large, have rejected Jesus. Here in this Roman church, in the center of Roman power, the capital city itself, there are just a handful of Jewish people combined with a majority of Gentile people, and they are struggling in how they are to engage with one another. And Paul, even though he's writing about the Jews, is really writing to the Gentiles. So in a sense, Paul is writing to you and me, because I'm guessing that the vast majority of those who are participating in my daily Devo series on Romans are not Jewish. And Paul is diving again into the history of the Hebrew Scriptures, our Old Testament, to describe what is happening among his people. He claims proudly to be of the Jewish heritage, and yet he sees that those of the Jewish heritage are caught in the same conflict of trying to get into God's good graces through obedience rather than through receiving God's love. That's why he says, if in love it is not as a result of obedience, this remnant that God is holding on to, otherwise love would cease to be love. Love in its best and most pure form is never an earned love. It's always a freely given love. I love my wife not because she's done things to make me love her. I love her simply because of who she is. I love my children simply because of who they are. Now, can they disappoint me? Absolutely. There are times that my wife and my kids can all drive me batty because they don't do what I expected them to do. But do I stop loving them as a result? No. And the same is true with God's love for the Jew and God's love for us, the non-Jew, the Gentile. And Paul here in chapter 11 is going to help bring us to a sense of understanding of what this freely given love is all about. And so let's go with Paul through this chapter, through this whole series of chapters 9, 10, and 11, and see what Paul sees that God is doing when God's love never ceases to be love. And I'll see you tomorrow for another daily devotion.